I'm Adrian Seet, and you are watching Nightline. The top stories. Majority of EPF contributors risk retiring below poverty lines, says Prime Minister. Also, Dato Sri Anwar set to table Budget 2023 in Parliament. Thanks for joining us. Two-thirds or 71% of Employees Provident Fund EPF active members aged 55 and below do not have sufficient funds to elevate them above the poverty level. Prime Minister Dato Sri Anwar Ibrahim said this was due to the 4 special withdrawals approved during the COVID-19 pandemic. In a written reply in Parliament on Thursday, Dato Sri Anwar, who is also the Finance Minister, said the number of active members who had reached the basic savings target of 240,000 ringgit by the age of 55 had dropped from 36% in 2020 to 29% at the end of last year. He said EPF estimated that members are required to work between 4 and 6 extra years to rebuild the savings that were withdrawn during the pandemic. EPF had implemented the schemes, namely I-Lestari, I-Sina, I-Chitra and special withdrawal to allow members aged 55 and below affected by the COVID-19 pandemic to dip into their savings. Some 8.1 million EPF members, or 62% of the 13.1 million members, opted for the withdrawals. Dato Sri Anwar said any additional withdrawals would only worsen the already alarming lack of savings amongst EPF members. He noted that in addition, any new withdrawal would also affect EPF's new investment opportunities and profit generation for the purpose of dividend payments to contributors in the future. As of December 31st last year, a total of 6.7 million members, or 51% of those aged under 55, have savings of less than 10,000 ringgit following the withdrawals. With this amount, the members only have an average of 42 ringgit a month in retirement funds over 20 years. He said the insufficient EPF savings requires attention as the nation was moving towards an aging nation status. On Friday, Prime Minister Dato Sri Anwar Ibrahim, who is also the Finance Minister, will unveil his and the Unity Government's first budget in Parliament. All eyes are also on whether he will introduce any new policies or measures that will give some insight into the nation's future economic direction. On Friday, Dato Sri Anwar will unveil the new government's first spending plan. The high cost of living, escalating core inflation, and an expectation of slower economic growth this year are the main challenges for Malaysia this year. The country is also still recovering from a damaging political crisis that began in 2020 and resulted in the change of 2 coalition governments and 4 prime ministers in just 3 years. And upon taking office, Dato Sri Anwar vowed to make the living cost issue a top priority. He is also looking to boost fiscal resilience as a safeguard against threats from a dimming global economy.
Kita mahu memberikan mesej yang jelas bahawa belanjawan ini belanjawan yang mengambil kira kedudukan ekonomi yang mencabar sekarang, tetapi belanjawan yang boleh memacu pertumbuhan, meyakinkan pelabur dan dapat memberi rahmah kepada rakyat terbanyak. Ini suatu cabaran yang sangat rumit, ya. Bagaimana kita boleh meyakini golongan kaya untuk melabur dan miskin untuk mendapatkan faedah. Kadang-kadang ada pertembungan di situ. Ini saya selalu sebut pembenturan ideas dan dasar. Jadi ini perimbangan ini penting.
In Thursday's written reply in Parliament, the Prime Minister said any plans to give direct cash aid to reduce poverty will be announced in the budget. He said the government is committed to ensure that direct cash assistance will continue to be channeled to the target groups to cope with the rising cost of living. Fitch Ratings this month warned that internal risks include growing public debt, low budget revenue, and lingering political uncertainty that hinders long-term policy making. Dato Sri Anwar has ruled out introducing broad-based consumption taxes, such as the goods and services taxes, to prevent burdening the poor. The people are keeping an eye out on how well the government can address issues surrounding economic growth and the rising living costs. The previous government had presented a tighter budget for 2023, while projecting weaker revenue and lower dividends penciled in from state oil company Petronas. Last October the 7th, then Finance Minister Dato Sri Tengku Zafrul Abdul Aziz presented the 2023 budget, which involved an allocation of 372.3 billion ringgit. And to weather the economic challenges that lie ahead, the government's responsibility is to ensure that the country is well prepared.
My expectation is that the government will ensure that this budget will be able to help the country to weather the global economic slowdown, which is currently happening this year, through various initiatives and mechanisms that cater and geared towards addressing both internal and external factors. For that reason, I think the budget will still be a deficit budget, but the percentage of deficit to GDP is probably lower than negative 5.8% in 2022. And the reason is because the government still needs to spend and help out the rakyat, even when the potential revenue generated still remains volatile due to uncertainties in the global market.
To address the cost of living, what's necessary is a sensible and targeted approach.
Unlike the previously tabled budget 2023, which happened before the general election, this upcoming budget will not be a budget with all kinds of goodies on offer, but rather this budget will focus on fulfilling some of the election manifestos, as well as incorporating the pillars of Malaysia Madani into the initiative under this budget, and not forgetting the ultimate objective of addressing the cost of living, but at the same time through a sensible and focused budget. Therefore, most likely, there will be an introduction of targeted subsidies on certain products or services, but not necessarily will be implemented immediately. But at the same time, the cash handout like Bantuan Sara Hidup will continue, but probably with some improvements to ensure that more people will be assisted through maybe some of reclassification of the household category of income.
And in anticipation of lesser handouts in the 2023 budget, Dato Sri Anwar's popularity should not be a concern, as the unity government's objective is to address pressing issues facing the country that will be tackled in a thoughtful and balanced way.
I think the people who will not be receiving this budget 2023 goodies will understand and appreciate that the government is prudent and the government is thinking about the people that really needed the help from the government, whether it's a cash aid or whether goodies in terms of something else. I guess those who will not be receiving the goodies, I think will understand it. So I don't think so it will affect that much. But again, people will appreciate it. When people appreciate it, I think the Prime Minister will be in the good books of the people, no doubt about that.
Our reporter, Muhammad Alif Yunus, spoke to some members of the public with regards to their expectations towards Budget 2023. And this is what they had to say.
The minister or the government should revise back what the cost, in terms of the commuting, in terms of the cost of living, so it could help every of us, like a normal citizen, to survive better in Malaysia.
Just hope that he could bring down our expenses, our daily based expenses, because day by day I can only feel that the expenses keep increasing, like our daily food, like vegetable and other stuff expenses, is just increasing day by day. So I just hope that they can control that.
Of course, definitely I hope they will improve the public transportation as well, because every time when I get in the train, it's always very crowded. There are times where I will miss the train because it's very crowded.
I want to see more allocations of the subsidy to the proper groups like the B40 and also M40. Like the targeted subsidy should be refined and to see to lessen the burden for the people, because we can see the cost of living is rising and the food are getting more expensive now, and also the transportation costs and everything.
Meanwhile, Dato Sri Anwar oversaw the final preparations for the budget at the Ministry of Finance ahead of the tabling on Friday. Dato Sri Anwar arrived at the ministry at 3:30 p.m. and was greeted by the two Deputy Finance Ministers, Dato Sri Ahmad Mazlan and Stephen Sim Chi Keong, as well as the Treasury Deputy Secretary General, Dato Johan Mahmud Marikan. The Prime Minister was then led to the Tax Operations Room and 2023 Budget Operations Room at Level 10 and signed the documents related to the budget. Dato Sri Anwar was earlier reported to have said that the 2023 budget would take into account the current economic challenges while at the same time drive the country's economic growth and attract investment. He said the government also took into account the country's competitiveness, the speed of business approvals, and several new initiatives including digitization, sustainable use, and the production of natural resources in the downstream process in the 2023 budget. Dato Sri Anwar will table the 2023 budget in Parliament on Friday at 4 p.m.
Ubah keutamaan demi kemampanan ekonomi.
Makmur bersama Malaysia Madani, iltizam kerajaan perpaduan untuk rakyat.
Cerakin dampak belanjawan 2023 bersama kami dan penganalisis.
Jumaat 24 Februari
bermula jam 3 petang
hanya di TV3. The 2023 budget. Spurring economic growth and investments while protecting the people. Can the budget keep Malaysia's recovery on track? In what ways will the proposal strengthen Malaysia's resilience in the face of continued volatility? Bank Islam's chief economist Firdaus Rosli takes a closer look at Datuk Sri Anwar Ibrahim's first budget on Money Matters this Saturday at 5 p.m. only on TV3.
Investigations into the Jana Wibawa program for the empowerment of competent Bumiputra contractors, Jana Wibawa, is still in process. The Malaysian Anti-Corruption Commission, MACC Chief Commissioner Tan Sri Azam Baki said the agency is preparing 3 to 4 more investigation papers on the matter.
Because investigation still ongoing.
Okay.
So that one I leave it to AG if the case completed.
When asked if Tan Sri Muhyiddin's previous statements were considered to be interfering with the investigation, Tan Sri Azam declined to comment. Prior to this, the Bersatu president said he was called by the MACC to record his statement on the Jana Wibawa project as a witness instead of a suspect. Meanwhile, the MACC has not dismissed the possibility that more people will be charged over their involvement in the Jana Wibawa program scandal. Meanwhile, Tan Sri Azam said a man who had accused the MACC of offering 10 million ringgit to Datuk Wan Saiful Wan Jan to implicate Bersatu President Tan Sri Muhyiddin Yassin in a corruption scandal has been arrested when he presented himself at the Commission's headquarters at 3:30 p.m. on Wednesday.
Walaupun saya tahu dia telah membuat permohonan maaf dalam Facebooknya, namun demikian ini satu perkara yang saya tegaskan lagi sekali, saya secara peribadi tidak ampunkanlah orang begini yang merosakkan reputasi SPRM dengan membuat tuduhan yang liar. Akibat daripada kenyataannya itu yang dikeluarkan itu, dia telah menimbulkan satu spekulasi yang amat tidak baik kepada SPRM dan benda ini tidak boleh dipadamkan. Dan mana-mana rata-rata pun masih lagi mempercayai bahawa wujudnya perkara ini. Jadi minta maaf itu satu perkara yang saya rasa satu perkara yang sengaja dipermain-mainkan.
Muhammad Shafiq Abdul Halim, who who is a political observer and freelance researcher for Datuk Wan Saiful, was arrested under Section 48 of the MACC Act for interfering with investigations. In another development, Tan Sri Azam said the MACC's investigation over the acquisition and takeover of Menara Kuala Lumpur has been completed and had been referred to the Attorney General.
Kes Menara KL siasatannya telah pun lengkap dan telah dikemukakan kepada Peguam Negara, dan kita tunggulah dalam tempoh terdekat ini apakah keputusan daripada Peguam Negara.
On January the 7th, two senior directors of a company with the title Datuk were remanded for 4 days to assist in the investigation related to the acquisition and takeover of KL Tower. The takeover went viral on social media when people questioned TM's decision through its subsidiary, Menara Kuala Lumpur Sdn Bhd, to transfer their full ownership to Hydro Shop Sdn Bhd last October. When we come back, at least 2 killed in the Florida shooting rampage. Stay with us. Welcome back. In the US, a gunman opened fire on 2 television journalists, reporting on a murder near Orlando, Florida, killing one and wounding the other, before fatally shooting a 9-year-old girl and wounding her mother in a nearby home. According to Orange County Sheriff, the suspect was identified as 19-year-old Keith Melvin Moses. It was reported that the gunman arrived and opened fire on a camera operator and a reporter as they stood near their vehicle, before entering a nearby home and shot the woman and her 9-year-old daughter. The victims were all taken to the hospital, but the girl and the reporter died. The gunman was detained as a suspect in both attacks and was formally charged in the killing hours earlier of a woman in her 20s, a shooting that the 2 journalists were covering when they came under fire. Turkey will widen an investigation into building contractors suspected of violating safety standards following its devastating earthquake as the country stepped up housings for victims. According to the country's Interior Minister, Süleyman Soylu, 564 suspects had been identified, with 160 people formally arrested and many more still under investigation. Soylu added that more than 600,000 apartments and 150,000 commercial premises had suffered at least moderate damage. In the meantime, some 313,000 tents had been erected, with 100,000 container homes to be installed in the earthquake zone. So far, the number of people killed in Turkey and Syria's devastating earthquakes have risen to 47,244. Businesses, schools, and most forms of an ordinary midweek day stood still in Palestine on Thursday, a day after 11 Palestinians were brutally killed during an Israeli raid in the city of Nablus. A Palestinian group called for the general strike as a form of protest, as some considered it a day of mourning, while others considered it a move reflecting solidarity. During the raid, Israeli troops had killed 11 Palestinians, including at least 4 fighters and 4 civilians, and wounded more than 100 people, 6 of whom are still in critical condition. The Palestinian death toll in violent incidents with Israel rises to 60 in 2023, the highest number in occupied territory since year 2000. The death toll from a collapsed coal mine in northern China rose to 5 on Thursday as rescuers continue to search for the dozens still missing after a massive landslide hindered recovery efforts overnight. More than 50 people were trapped when a 180-meter-high slope gave way at the open pit mine in the Inner Mongolia region's Al-Zalef Bana on Wednesday. Hundreds of rescue workers were dispatched to the remote site, but another landslide later that day temporarily halted efforts to save those trapped beneath the rubble. Rescuers have since resumed their work, with reports that confirm that at least 5 people had been killed in the incident, with 6 injured and 48 still unaccounted for. On to sports. Defending world champion Max Verstappen set the fastest time in Formula One's first pre-season testing session on Thursday in Bahrain. The Dutch Red Bull driver topped the timings ahead of Ferrari's Carlos Sainz and Williams' Alex Albon. Sainz was quickest for half the test session, but was then beaten by 0.3 seconds by Verstappen, who will carry on testing in the afternoon while the other teams swap drivers. The testing suffered a red flag after just 10 minutes after Aston Martin's Filip Drugovich stopped out of the circuit with an electrical fault. Zhao Guanyu impressed in the Alfa Romeo, finishing the morning 4th fastest ahead of Mercedes' George Russell, who was first out onto the circuit. The Haas team unveiled a new car in the pit lane before Nico Hülkenberg went out and set the 6th quickest time. Yuki Tsunoda finished 8th for AlphaTauri, ahead of his former teammate Pierre Gasly, who was 9th in his Alpine. Rookie Oscar Piastri rounded out the standings for McLaren, almost 2 seconds slower than Verstappen's best lap. On to tennis. Second seed Cameron Norrie moved into the last 8 of the Rio Open by beating Brazilian Thiago Monteiro 7-5, 7-5 at the Jockey Club Brasileiro in Rio de Janeiro. The British number 1 earned a whopping 21 break points and converted 5 to reach the quarterfinals against the home favourite. Monteiro scratched and clawed to stay alive, saving a trio of match points while serving against Norrie at 5-3 in the second set. He then broke back in the next game to level at 5-all. But Norrie responded in kind, breaking for 6-5 and finally locking down his triumph by converting his 6th match point at the 2-hour and 30-minute mark to jump to 15-3 on the season. He will face Hugo de Lien of Bolivia next. Police seizes a Syabu worth more than 64 million ringgit. This and more when Nightline returns. Police crippled a drug syndicate following its botched attempt to avoid detection by the authorities by attempting to smuggle 1.8 tons of Syabu, worth about 64.8 million ringgit, in a lorry on a tow truck. Perlis Police Chief Dato' Surina Saad said the drugs were uncovered after the police stopped the tow truck during an integrated operation near Jalan Sungai Baru, Simpang Empat on February the 19th. During the inspection, the enforcement team found 27 sacks, each containing 25 packages believed to be Syabu in the lorry that was on the tow truck. 4 men and a woman, all locals aged between 29 and 49, were arrested to facilitate the investigation. All of them are in remand until February the 25th for investigations under Section 39B of the Dangerous Drugs Act 1952. One of the suspects even attempted to bribe the police by offering a sum of 200,000 ringgit, and the case had been handed over to the Malaysian Anti-Corruption Commission for investigation. After a 2-year absence, the Besor Carnival is back. It is a major cultural event in the region, bringing together the majority of the country's ethnic groups. Let's take a look at the celebrations as we wrap up Nightline this time around. With that, I'm Adrian Seet. Thank you for watching, stay safe, and have a great Friday ahead.